All right, thank you everyone for joining us for this panel today. I know it's probably been a long day hearing many interesting topics. We have a great discussion planned for you today for really bright people attacking the problem of deploying agents across the enterprise and for customers via very different angles. So I think it'd be great to start just going down the line, introducing everyone. I'll start. My name is Zach Ronfine. I'm an investor at Sound Ventures. We're a venture firm that is very focused on the AI application layer, over $1 billion in management, co-founded by Ashton Kutcher, the actor, and Guy Oseary, the music manager, investors in OpenAI and Anthropic, as well as many of the companies that are hopefully leveraging those model providers to build incredible value for all of us here.
Hey everyone, I'm Barkha Saxena. I am Chief Data, AI, and Analytics Officer at Chime. Chime is a mission-driven fintech company which is focused on bringing financial progress for everyday American. As in my role, I lead the entire data and AI strategy, which is focused on delivering value for our members. We have built and deployed AI agents across risk, marketing, engineering, and support, and looking forward to this discussion.
Hi, everybody. My name is Federico Coenfrewe. I'm Senior Vice President of AI and Data Operations at MasterCard. And there, my team focuses on our enterprise AI and data strategy, how we deploy AI internally for the use of our employees, as well as how do we actually go through that journey? How do we train our employees to learn about AI and use it? How do we go through it, as well as a number of strategic efforts? So looking forward to today.
Hey everyone, I'm John Fry. I'm the CEO at LendFlow. We have a platform for embedded lending infrastructure and AI and automation infrastructure. I've been in the SMB lending space for the past 15 years. I've had a few different companies in this space operating across a few different parts of the platform that gave us a lot of the insights for LendFlow. The customer acquisition and the lead gen side, setting up call centers for customer support and onboarding, as well as building out decisioning infrastructure for SMB lenders. So excited to dig in and go into the details with all of you. Yeah, great to be here.
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jatin Dave. I'm a managing director in the AI practice at Deloitte. Deloitte is possibly the largest professional services company in the world. On the AI and engineering side, we help our clients, enterprises, think through what their AI strategy should be, building out those use cases and solutions and platforms, and also helping them drive adoption and then maintain those platforms. Nice to see you all here.
Great. I'd love to start with what's working now. And Jatin, as we've looked at the enterprise landscape, we've seen a number of companies growing rapidly from a revenue standpoint, primarily driven by high contract values and a strong willingness to adopt from enterprises themselves. I think we're in a period of AI tourism to some degree where enterprises are willing to adopt many solutions that may be overlapping today with the goal of consolidating and choosing a long-term partner moving forward. From your vantage point, what use cases with AI agents are really most prominent in your understanding of enterprise deployments? And when you're going from POC to production, what use cases are actually driving stickiness?
You're very right. You could say it's the world of AI tourism. Folks here would say, I'm done with POCs. I don't want to do one more. The reality is out there, our research shows only about 30% of the POCs make it to production, which means people are trying a lot. Not everything is even going into production. And then after it goes into production, I want to see people raise their hands if you are actually measuring adoption. Who here is saying, I measure adoption? Okay, well, good to see a few hands up. Those are the challenges in taking an idea from POC to production and scale. In terms of what's sticking within organizations, the most common ones I'm sure you've all heard of, it's about coding and mostly application development in the IT space, which is where we see significant impact, followed by your common areas of customer service, contact center, sales and marketing, those being the most common areas. But about 60 to 80% of the effort, the number of use cases that organizations are working on, are what are core to their business processes. For example, in the financial services space, in the wealth management space, your financial advisor is a very core member of the firm that leads to revenue generation. And in that space, we're seeing a lot of use cases that are already in production that are driving adoption around, hey, help me just good old take meeting notes. But this isn't about your co-pilot on Teams, let me press a button, get an output. This is about driving action, which means AI helping you identify opportunities, AI telling you, hey, on the call, I heard there was going to be a grandchild. Therefore, I'm going to add that grandchild to the family tree so that on your next call, you know that you have to recommend a 529 plan to this person. So it's really driving those business processes that are hard to their business. That's where we see most impact, most opportunity. In terms of what that impact could look like, for a wealth management services firm, they're focusing on the contact center, helping these advisors. Out there, they are consolidating the skills in the contact center down to a third, which means their contact center reps are going to have a lot more skills than they did in the past, which is going to translate for them into fewer handoffs between calls, which means better, faster service going to the financial advisors who in turn are going to impact their clients. In terms of what's driving stickiness, let me flip it and say what is challenging in this space. The challenge areas are, one, I don't have data, or the data is really unreliable. That is honestly the biggest blocker. Keep apart the InfoSec team saying you can't go do this or can't do that. It's just, if you don't have data, the AI is honestly practically useless. Second is the measurement strategy, where very few organizations have a strategy or actively trying that. Third is around adoption. Do you have an adoption program in place? You've rolled out AI. Honestly, it's optional today with human in the loop, because you have a button, and if the end user doesn't click the button and says, I'm going to do the research myself, good luck on getting any of those benefits. So those are the areas that are honestly blockers in what's not letting people adopt AI.
Super helpful. And John, you've mentioned using voice agents to help SMBs complete applications, collect documents, schedule calls, revive cold leads. Across your live deployments, how have those agents impacted either conversion rates or speed to funding compared to some of your old processes?
Those are definitely a few of the key metrics we focus on. It has impact on both. Before, it's really transforming a very human capital oriented process into a programmatic one, right? And so that means that you're not waiting for the human always to initiate the next step. That in lending, that can be really challenging when you're operating at a lot of scale, especially if you're growing very quickly. And so being able to transfer that, to make that programmatic, has a really big impact on speed and also conversion. Things are less likely to get lost. And so at each of the touch points, is just identifying what those are through the process and then implementing and making sure you have those agents in place. And that leads to things getting done faster, right? And of course, you always have that backline of humans to augment and support the process, to audit, to QA, to have the feedback loop to make sure that's improving over time. But you have that first line of defense that you can count on things to happen when you like them to, because there's a lot of different touch points in the process through the life of that customer, not only in the initial application, but all the way to the end. And that ultimately also provides a much better experience for the end customer. And it also helps you service customers. It's better for your brand too, because it helps you service customers that you couldn't service well before because it wasn't ROA positive, or what didn't make as much sense because are you going to focus on the large, most profitable leads, or are you going to focus on the ones that are smaller? And when you have limited capacity, it means you're always focusing on the larger ones, less on the smaller ones. Now you can provide the same magical experience across the board, which is very good for your brand, right? It means they're more likely to come back to you, and now you have the touch points for them to come back as well. So it creates great experience for the customers, which creates higher conversion rates as well through the process, and also means that they're more likely to return. Right? They're more likely to return because they had, even if they had a bad experience, maybe they were educated in that process, right? And so they were taken care of. They were heard. And if they weren't, then they're going to go off to the next one. But if they did, and you're also following up and engaging with them, then they're more likely to re-engage with you than others they may have dealt with, right? Because it's very likely they'd be, shopping around or trying different things because of the information asymmetry. They're not sure what the best provider or the best product is going to be. And so the only thing that can help them build trust is the experience that they have. And so if you're staying in touch with them, you're educating them, you're providing value, you're consistent, you're building that trust, then it also creates a likelihood that you're going to come back to you. So yeah, many different endpoints are impacted, and yeah, it touches those key metrics a lot.
And I think it's an important note, and we'll get to a section where we touch on ROI shortly, but often when we measure ROI, we're thinking quantitatively. But you're describing measuring ROI on a qualitative basis from a customer experience standpoint, and that's emotion, that's feeling, that's something that you can't necessarily put into numbers, but matters just as much for retention and you know, the long-term health of the business.
Yeah, I would add in terms of that, ROI doesn't necessarily always have to be financial. Just like with any other investment you'll make internally or when you deploy technology, you may have other goals for it, and it's okay if it doesn't pay back as long as you achieve the success metrics. What's really important is, what are you really trying to achieve there? How are you moving the needle and actually using that as your North Star?
Absolutely. And I guess coming back to interesting timing for this panel, because just last week, Pinterest CEO Bill Reddy said on an earnings call that the world where AI agents autonomously shop on a user's behalf is still far from the future. MasterCard in April launched Agent Pay, which lets agents make secure AI payments. Lets agents make secure payments on behalf of users. So I have two questions for you, Federico. One, why is Bill Reddy wrong? And and two, you know, what are the most common types of purchases that you're seeing through Agent Pay today?
Yeah, happy to answer that. Let's focus on a couple of data points. What we're seeing already, and it's been public in the media, is a growing amount of internet traffic related to product discovery is happening more and more on the consumer agent. So think ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, Gemini. People, consumers, are going to these platforms to search for products. And as we started looking at that type of experience, what we realized was the loop isn't closed. What you expect after you go in and you ask for example, a pair of shoes for running based on your gait and specifics of the type of races you run, was that once you actually interact with the agent and you select what pair of shoes you want to buy, there's a natural tendency to say, well, then go ahead and execute the payment for me. Why do I have to manually enter my credentials and go to the merchant's website and do that? And so there's been signals amongst consumer patterns that desire is there. But then we said, well, what's the right way to enable that? Now, while I won't make a comment on Bill Reddy's comment, what I will say is, just like with any other form of payments, consumers and businesses are going to select what is most seamless and trustworthy for them. And so that's where we focus on. We want to make sure that if consumers and businesses have a desire to have AI agents make payments on their behalf, even for small, routine types of transactions, we have to make sure that it's as seamless, as trustworthy, and as secure as any transaction you make, whether online or whether when you're tapping your card on your phone. And so that's where we focus on. So the way to think about Agent Pay, which is the capability that we developed, is how do we take the capabilities in the network and how do we make them so that A, they're interoperable with the common ways AI agents work, but two, that we do so in a way that you take some of the non-determinism of AI agents and you say, how do I make sure that at different points in the ecosystem, I can make sure that the agent is making a transaction that you, the consumer, intended for the products or services that you intended within a number of safeguards and guardrails that you, the consumer, or you, the originating business, made. And that's kind of the key focus. And so I don't think we're ready to make a statement on, all payments will be agent made or not, but I think it's much rather that we see a growing consensus that AI agents or consumers desire AI agents to make payments on their behalf, and it's our role in the ecosystem to enable that.
It makes sense, and it actually brings up a topic that I think everyone here could touch on, which is guardrailing, right? And making sure that these agents are operating in ways that are compliant and to the expectations of both the companies deploying them and the users using them. Maybe Barca, starting with you, in a regulated environment like fintech, how does, I guess one, how is Chime, deploying agents both externally to the users and internally today? And how do you think about, ensuring that these agents are performing within the guardrails of your expectations?
Yep, great question. So I would say, first of all, when we look at, as I was hearing everyone, and especially like Jatin, when you were talking about like people experiment and like only 30% of the agents actually go deployment, I think one unique thing about Chime is we are at I would say at the sweet spot of the size. Like we are big enough that there is a scale for AI agents to deliver value. But at the same time, we are not so big where lots of things can happen here and there. And when it comes to deployment, where is my data? Before Chime, I was at McKinsey, so I'm very familiar of the problem you were talking about. But within that, at Chime, because it really does matter, like, hey, where are we making an investment? Like every dollar counts. We can't just, like, yes, people can experiment, but we leave that as more like the innovation and the hackathon people trying. But there are areas where we identify that, hey, here are the places where we really want to invest in building AI agents to deliver the value. And the thinking about, like, hey, where do we want to invest in? It started with, again, Chime is a very member-obsessed company. So we looked at it from the perspective of what are the areas where we think we can deliver value for our members. And we are going to measure the success based on the member criteria, whether it could be the satisfaction we deliver, or we can help our member access whatever they were looking for, different financial products, faster. And doing all of that, being in a regulated environment, it's very important that the AI agents we are building, it's data compliant as well as the regulatory compliant. And then adding to that, you were all talking about the adoption, right? You can build a product, but if nobody is going to use it, it's just not useful, right? So we took a more like the product approach of building these AI agents, because when you build it with that mindset, you are like, when we think about this is the area we are going to invest in, there is a cross-functional team which comes into play. For my team, there's an AI team and there's a data team, because we start with this is the data we will need to build these agents. There is a risk team and the policy team. They're all in the designing of the product from the very beginning. And we decide on how we are going to measure it before we start to build the product. And then at the same time, we have, as we started to invest heavily on the AI agents development and just the broader AI, at the same time, we kicked off parallel work streams around the culture change, because it's super important. And I remember coming from McKinsey, like there was a lot of things we were advising our clients was around the change management you have to go through to get people to adopt the AI agents. And second, the training, because the two have to go hand in hand. So again, taking the product approach has allowed us to stay in the guardrails, to your question, deliver the value, and make sure there is an adoption, because we are investing in parallel in terms of the culture as well as the training.
I'd add one more thing. So we've taken a similar approach. We like to talk about it as we have a product team that's focused on this. One of the other benefits to it is it often gets you to outcomes faster, because one of the things I keep hearing is, well, we either deploy the agents or not, and it's not a binary moment, right? When you take a product-focused approach to deploying AI agents, or any technology for that matter, you start with an MVP, right? You start with the lowest common denominator. You get that in the hands of your people. You go through the first version of change management as you're building the next. And as you grow in complexity, the agentic systems you're building, you're also reflecting feedback from your customers, who in many cases are your own people. And so that tends to get you to outcomes faster than just saying, I'm going to monolithically build an AI agent system, wait until I have it ready and then deploy it. Rather, working iteratively helps you get to those points.
Yeah, I'll jump in too. I mean, it's analogous just to shipping code as well, and you have to follow the same processes as if you're releasing a new feature. And this the same queue, right? You're gonna do a code review, right? You're gonna do an agent review. You're gonna put it into QA. You're gonna QA it, And then you're going to implement maybe some different types of processes that are the same, but just can do those better. So for example, creating simulations of past scenarios and having agents call other agents to test all the scenarios. Because many times with agents that have agency, you can make one change and it can impact another scenario from the past or a number of different scenarios that you didn't anticipate. And so you need to have simulations for those to make sure that when you ship them, right, you have, for example, for voice AI, you have many different agents calling the new agent that you've made the changes to and measuring the outcomes and making sure that all the past scenarios have been completed. And then when you ship it and you iterate, to your point, you have an agent is monitoring the calls and looking for things like sentiment of the call and measuring that, and then looking for scenarios where there was a bad sentiment or something failed, and then augmenting that with humans who are manually going through and QAing. And each time there's a correction that made, it also needs to be added into the simulations so that you can make sure now from that point forward, every time you ship a change to an agent, right, it's going through all of the past scenarios, and that list is going to grow and grow. And so you can ensure over time with more and more precision that the agents are going to be quality when they're in production. And after a certain amount of time, then you get to a very high level of accuracy.
Absolutely. I mean, and from our vantage point, we're also seeing this market emerge as the capabilities of agents to truly act autonomously on users' behalfs emerge as well, right? You have companies like Witness AI who are operating at runtime, ensuring that enterprises and their employees can use LLMs and based on their role within the company, deploy agents that have the same permissions that they do with regard to data access. You have companies like Haze Labs who are all over the pre-production side and red teaming, adversarial testing, making sure that models and agents are ready to deploy before they hit users' hands. So I think the buy versus build dynamic is something that companies, I'm sure a lot of people in this audience have faced themselves of, do I buy this? Do I build this with my resources internally? I think we'll continue to see that evolve. John, I have one question for you, and it relates to another thread that we've heard over the last few years where we've spoken to many C-suites at large enterprises where they've said, we need an AI strategy. We know we need an AI strategy, but we don't exactly know what that strategy is. A year ago, that may have been as it relates to LLMs. Today, it's as it relates to agents. When you hear that and you hear, hey, we know that we have to start implementing this somewhere within the org, but we don't know exactly where to start, what are some of the kind of lowest hanging fruit that you tend to recognize or recommend as it relates to where folks can deploy their first agent use case?
When it comes to deploying use cases or deploying AI at a company, we take a value-driven approach to helping identify this. Broadly, when it comes to strategies, it's a two-pronged strategy which most organizations follow. One is let's democratize AI. Everyone should have access to a ChatGPT-like product, whether it's Claude, whether it's your homegrown tooling, which in the background calls an LLM. So that's one. And then second is a more tops-down, focused effort around identifying value. On the first one, it's about, well, people have access to this chatbot that I've rolled out. Now people will use it. I've built it. They'll come. They'll use. There'll be value coming out. The challenges on that one tend to be more around do people even know how to write a good prompt? It's hard to write good prompts. Anyone can write a prompt, but good prompts, that's not easy. So have you trained your people in terms of prompt engineering? And I don't mean everyone needs to write a 2-page prompt, but do they know what they're after? Are they being very specific in those prompts? And then it's about sharing within them, which means I've built a prompt, a Claude artifact or a Claude project. Now, how am I sharing that with the rest of my team members? Because it could be useful for a lot of people. In the grassroots kind of world where I wrote a prompt for myself, I might not know how to share it. And then as you see more acceptance on the sharing front, how are you building it within the workflow of the user? So that means you're elevating something that is done at the grassroots level up into something that can be used in the enterprise. And on the second one, which is a more tops-down approach, the evaluation criteria are around not just ROI, but around, is this a desirable use case? Would my customers love it if this were part of the product? Is it viable in terms of, am I going to make money off of it? Will it have a P&L impact? And then is this feasible or not? That results in us boiling down to the areas that matter for the business. Because it's very easy to go pick a use case, pick an area, and say, I'm going to build a piece of this puzzle, and then you can plant a flag of success, but there's no value flowing through at that point into the P&L.
Right. Barca, Chime was an early adopter of LLMs internally to improve efficiency amongst the team's workflows. Also an adopter of AI as it relates to the user experience. I'm curious, how do you decide which internal workflows are best to augment via AI, via agents to drive efficiency? And what approach to integrating agents has also maximized the user experience as you've continued to explore this landscape?
Yep. So I would say it's when we think about the AI strategy, we look at the four things as we decide, like, hey, do we really want to put an AI agent there? So first one is, again, it has to create value for members. Sometimes it comes from the member-facing products we are rolling out, and sometimes it comes through like internally enabling engineering teams to build faster, so all the features which we wanted to build for a longer time horizon can be done faster. So first, that value proposition has to be clear. Second, the problem needs to have the scale so that the automation actually makes sense. And within that, it's not the problem of just like the one-time problem of the large volume, but is it a repetitive task which needs to be done? So we look for those signals to see, hey, if the agents are going to deliver value in the long term. Third is just the risk appetite, right? So even when we build the agents for the support, we didn't automate the whole workflow by design because there were certain things which we wanted the agents, like the password reset. Of course, agents can do it. But anything which was high touch, we enabled a different type of agents to actually empower our agents, serve our members better. So that, and then the fourth one is Jatin, you called out the data. I mean, it's almost interesting that everybody talks about it, but they kind of just brush it off. Like they don't really, very few people, I guess the people who are in the depth of the data understand truly like how big that problem is. I mean, at the end, AI agents are as intelligent as the data you are putting in. Like beyond the LLM, your context comes from your data. And if that data is wrong, it can create a risk. And if we end up serving our members wrong, it matters to us, right? When a member calls, we need to have the right information and the right decision for the member. So again, we look at it from the member value, the risk appetite of the decision, the automation, and is it a scalable problem where we will derive the value. And when it comes to the integration, again, it's the workflow integration with humans, right? Even like, for example, when we launched this for the support, we worked with the agents hand in hand to make sure that we are building the solution with them so that they feel like fully integrated into the process. In some other places, like when we use these AI models for our risk flows, we work with the risk teams to make sure, hey, here are the parts of the workflow which we believe that we are comfortable, the data is ready, and we want AI agents to be able to give us a decision, but then what is the workflow after that? So we are redesigning the entire workflows to make sure we are looking at the things end to end, and once we put it on and start using it in production, we are monitoring it to make sure that no matter how good product you build, like everybody who has built a product, you know that the real thing comes when it goes live. Building that feedback loop to make sure we are learning and continuing to iterate on it so the team doesn't disassemble as soon as the product gets delivered. It continues. And again, having been to the companies of the various sizes, like I do know that what we have is kind of a luxury because a lot of time you don't have it, but I think we just have this right scale and the mindset. And again, having some early start has allowed us to just refine these things that as LLMs are becoming more and more powerful, we are ready to be able to just continue to invest and get value from it.
What is that one, for people in the audience, if they're thinking about those first few use cases they could start to knock out inside of their organizations, what's the one question that they should be asking themselves to help distill where they should dedicate their energy, time, and resources today as it relates to that use case?
Again, so first, of course, identifying the use case where you are going to get the scale through the automation repetition, and then data. I cannot overemphasize. I mean, Jatin, you can speak to it, but a lot of POCs don't go into production for two reasons, based on my experience. One is the data, second is the culture in the organization.
On on the data front, I would say that sometimes it is possible to infer information. We're working with a client where they were like, yeah, we can't use any of these knowledge bases in our support environment because our knowledge articles are a bunch of crap. Nobody's maintaining them. Well, but you have call recordings, which are reliable because you know that solve the problem. You can transcribe those, and if you transcribe those, you can come up with the right knowledge articles, which could then feed into AI. In their case, they were buying a product, so they had to feed it in. So it was possible in their case to build out the data structure in the right way. But it's not, as I said, it's only sometimes when you can do it, but you have to get creative with on the data side.
I would mention, I think there's two approaches you can take. One is there's a lot of talk already, in the media about there's a number of use cases that the industry has seemed to got into a good rhythm in, like software engineering, customer support, etc. There's a reason why there's a lot of talk about it, and so that's one approach. Like you can buy off-the-shelf solutions for that more and more. Honestly, if you just want to look internally, just find tasks or processes that have very easy access to data, are low risk, are repeatable, and that your people really dislike doing. You find things with those 4 characteristics, you can start there because it'll drive adoption, because it's things where you're not going to have a lot of resistance. People want to stop doing that type of work. But also, you cherry pick things that are easy, maybe not very complex data, maybe not something that if it goes wrong, it's going to cause reputational or even worse type of damages. You find things that are repeatable, where once you deploy it, you have confidence that you can get it moving that way. You don't have to kind of reinvent every framework. Just find what is common sense. Start there, get you testing, because you go through those first use cases, you'll realize, okay, what is going to be our flavor to scale things? What is going to be our flavor for how we ensure that there's compliance and that we do have observability once we're in production and all of those things?
Absolutely. I would love to move on to a section of kind of, what's next? What is not possible yet that you all are excited about? John, I'd love to start with you. As you continue to follow where this space is going, what use cases are emerging that have not been able to come to fruition today, but that you are excited about being able to implement into LenFlow moving forward?
Yeah, for sure. So I think as you go along and you have the first one, right, the low-hanging fruit, right, some repetitive, low-value, inefficient task, and you start there, right? There's always going to be a natural progression from that point, right? You need the trigger, of course, to trigger that, but when it's finished, you also need to be able to notify the next step of the process, right? And then maybe there's another agent that can come in for that part of the process, and then the next part, right? So it's an agent for maybe collecting a document in lending, right, to extracting, categorizing that document, extracting data from that document, then going and enriching with new information, and then acting on that information, running calculations, right? And each of those is an independent agent, right? And as you go along and as you progress, then the agents can build off of each other, right? And so the context from each individual agent can feed into the other agents so they can all do a better job, right? And you can have this orchestration and abstract more and more of the complexity by having the orchestration layer on top of each of these individual components, right? Think of that as like a leg and an arm and a certain activity. And if you have an orchestrator on top, then it extracts more and more of the complexity away from the end users, whether that's a customer-facing user or an internal team member, right? And so I think we're just really getting to the point where you can have all these different types of models, and each have their strengths and weaknesses, but they can come together as a larger whole. And I think that's really exciting. And when they can share context and the data that's been mentioned several times, it's so important. I think that's where you're going to have the really magical experiences happen, and be able to make these processes hyper efficient and great.
Absolutely. Yeah, Barka.
Yeah, I would say, I think your question was what one use case AI will not be able to solve, right?
Well, we can hit on that for sure. I get the question that I had asked John was more so, what's one use case that's not quite possible today, given the capabilities of the models, but given your understanding of the trajectory of where things are going, you are excited about coming to fruition. But
I was just going to answer the first part of the question.
feel free to answer any part.
Yeah, I would say that's where I am more in the camp of the Bill's comment you mentioned at Pinterest. So before Chime and McKinsey, I was at Poshmark, which is in the social commerce space, and really saw the fashion and what it means to people. And I feel that anything where there's any aspect of the high context and high touch and the human emotions matter, I don't think we will be able to completely, fully automate it. And that includes the support, because there's some part which can be automated. Some does require a human to talk. So I would say that's the place I have sincere hope that we never try to do the full automation. Similarly, like the shopping is such an individualistic experience. For some people it will be okay, but there's a lot of people, like having spent 10 years at Poshmark, fashion is really, really personal. Like you want to make that decision yourself or through the other people you trust.
Absolutely. I think the ideal world of agents is one where, you know, on the note of what Federico mentioned, these pieces of software are acting autonomously on our behalf for the tasks that we do not like doing.
I would be very happy if an AI agent can just buy me milk every week,
Right.
so I don't have to remember.
Right. Well, I'm curious, like, raise your hand if you very much enjoy taking notes on calls.
We got one taker.
Not many. And we're seeing a lot of platforms that are, you know, joining meetings and transcribing meetings. And today, those transcripts kind of live within that end output. But I think soon we'll be in a world where, given the context of the multiple conversations you've had with the individual on the other line, you said you do X, Y, and Z action item or follow-up, and before that meeting's over, you have that email drafted, ready for a one-click send. So that's something that I'm personally excited about, where it understands all of the data that I've accumulated in my life and my conversations, and now it's actually taking on the burden of doing some of the work that feels repetitive, more mundane, and not necessarily related to my brain power, and more so just the energy I have to expend on manual tasks.
Actually, I would say, as you are saying, there is one example where AI agents today are not able to do the task because I tried to build something, but I hope someday to do. If there can be an AI agent or multiple AI agents who can respond to my Slack messages in all channels, I will take it. Going back to what you said, right? The things you don't want to do.
Absolutely.
That can be done. Well, that's done. That's being done. So
I will talk to
yeah,
there are different types of people, and figuring out like how you respond to your CEO versus someone in your team, to the product. I would love to see.
Yeah, you need a routing layer for each one, and then you route through, and then you just have it monitor all the channels and all the conversations you have. You can do the private ones and the public ones as well. So that's
Okay, you are getting an email.
Yeah.
Guess who's going to reply?
Yeah, the trick is to make sure that people can't tell that it's an AI. So it's kind of good if they know, so that way they can call you out if they recognize. But it's part of the game, so it's fun.
I want to make sure we get maybe a couple questions from the audience in the last 5 minutes that we have here. Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. My name's Raheem, by the way. I lead AI for CX for Ascent, which is a large Canadian company. Jatin, you mentioned blockers to AI was adoption, data, and measurement. Could you expand on the measurement, please, for us?
So measurement is around one. What does adoption look like? That's easy. Everybody's looking at their monthly active users on whatever platform they use. But then within there, for the transactions that are being enabled, how often is AI being used? And then to what degree is it actually giving the right answers? For example, generating meeting minutes, generating emails, those are very common use cases. But when a rep or a biz dev rep actually sends an email out, how much of the AI-originated answer did they use, and how much did they change it? And how much time did it take to do that work? And was the biz dev rep the human writing the email? What was the response rate on that like versus the AI-generated ones? And these are easy things to measure, but it requires a lot of initial product thinking to think about what am I going to measure that is going to tell me if what I built is good enough or not. Because eventually what happens is 4 or 5 quarters out, the CFO in an enterprise says, I spent a lot of money. Where's my P&L impact? And it's hard to drive attribution down just to AI, because, hey, I built out a biz dev rep agent, it's sending out emails, I'm selling more. But was that because there was a promotion that was running? Was that because you're just in a hot market? Or was that because of AI? It's hard to attribute at that level. But you can say, my response rates were better, my win rates were better. So that's the measurement part that I'm talking about. And it's almost always an afterthought because people are like, I rolled this out, and now I have to explain to the CFO, so I'm going to start measuring.
Hi, I'm Swapnil. I lead a data science team at a pharma company in Massachusetts. I have a follow-up question for Federico and Jatin. Federico, you mentioned build agents which replace people's repetitive tasks they don't like to do. Jatin, you mentioned prompt engineering is very, very hard. I am working on something similar where I'm trying to replace those repetitive tasks. Is there any magic silver bullet that can help me tie people's need to replace these clunky repetitive tasks they don't want to do and kind of bring them, how do I educate them with better prompt engineering? Because I have seen that problem. I have read a few directions on how that could be improved, but anything else you can expand on?
Yeah, so I'd share two things. So going back to the product thinking, the way that we strategically have selected a number of areas around the company where we've gone very deep and we said, we're really going to transform here. So with that same product thinking, we've done discovery work. What do people work on? Where in data do you see processes stalling, or where are the most exceptions? And that's where we started. Like, it is not revolutionary. It's just process reengineering thinking. And even a simple version of that gets you to start seeing that. I would not also discount just the water cooler talk, like where people in the company already acknowledge there's an issue or there's an opportunity, you can start there. And maybe to pass it over to Jatin, in terms of prompt engineering, I'm personally not an expert, but what has actually worked for me is I use my AI agent to prompt engineer for me. So I put in my thoughts and I say, give me a well-structured prompt that I'm going to give this tool, and then I literally copy and just feed it right back in. It saves me, in the spirit of saving repetitive tasks. I haven't had to study prompt engineering because now for like one-shot things or whatnot, I'm good enough just being augmented by the LLM itself.
I agree on the water cooler part that you said. Absolutely. That is truly the way to make this happen. As you're thinking of doing that at an organizational level, you do need a program of some sort that you would run. Let's just call it an adoption program, and then prompt engineering training is a part of it. Truly what the way people improve upon it is, one, they need to write a prompt. If you think of finance organization where people's job is processing invoices, they may not be very keen on figuring out what's the best way to extract information from a really crappy invoice or a spreadsheet they received along with it that they'll spend 2 hours trying to just copy paste over in a structured format. Can AI do it for them faster? Yes. But if they've never seen it, they won't know that it's even possible. So you do need to run a program that helps people see what's called art of the possible. And it's not always you showing it. It's more of the team members. Let's just call them the super users or the power users. The 2 people in the team that have figured something out, enabling them to share with the larger team is what will drive more, call it prompt learning.
That's certainly true, because you don't have everyone build their own agent for the prompt. You can have someone do it and then make sure it's translating it into a structure that's been effective on other agents in a language, transferring to maybe Markdown or JSON or whatever that most of the other team won't know. And just pulling in some other pieces that people brought in from previous in the conversation, it's not always, remember, it's also for this, it's not about the first prompt. You also need the process of it went wrong, identifying what went wrong, feeding it back in and telling it rebuild the prompt based on this, and then running the simulation to make sure it covered all the scenarios, and then pushing the new prompt to production. So that is equally, if not more important part of the process than just getting that initial prompt.